Hello friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my spoiler chat for Knife of Dreams, the 11th book in the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan, and if you've been around my channel for a while, you will know probably that I do this series. At least if you read Wheel of Time you will know. And this is sort of my ground rules are, this is my first time reading the series, so please, if you are going to comment your thoughts on this video, which I would love if you would do, please don't go past Knife of Dreams in any sort of like spoilery talk, because I just know what I know, like to the end of this book, and that's all. But let's just get right into talking about this book and what I thought. Because, oh my goodness. So this was 4.5 stars for me, and that is coming on the heels of Crossroads of Twilight, which was 2 stars for me, and I do know that Crossroads of Twilight, like most people, don't like it. And of course, I didn't really like it either. Like, I liked parts of it, but as a book, I didn't think it did a great job of being like an enclosed volume. As part of the larger Wheel of Time, like sure, I'm fine with it, but I didn't really feel like it had closure, had payoffs, etc. And I could not feel more differently about Knife of Dreams. It's such a breath of fresh air. I wrote a very brief Goodreads review, and I basically said that, like, if I didn't know, I would not have thought that Knife of Dreams and Crossroads of Twilight were written by the same person. And I am so happy that Robert Jordan got to go out on a high note in this series, because of course Knife of Dreams is the last book that is like billed as just Robert Jordan, because like for the final 3, of course, Brandon Sanderson came in collaboration to finish the series, and I have not gotten there yet. But if you had like taken the names off the covers, I probably would have thought that this is when Sanderson came in, but it was Jordan, and I guess I'm just like weirdly proud of him. Like, I was getting a little disappointed towards the end of the slog, and I knew that the slog ended, so I had that like touchstone and that hope, but at the same time I felt like it was widening so much that I had concerns about how he was going to start tightening the story back up again and bringing it back together. But he really like gave me back my faith and gave me back my motivation to like finish this series month by month and continue reading one Wheel of Time book per month. So that was awesome. Of course, 4.5 stars means that I rounded up to 5 stars on Goodreads, and this has definitely been one of my favorites in the series. So having said that, let's get into why it was one of my favorites in the series and talk about some of the stuff that happened in this book. So already in the prologue, we start off with an event that, in my opinion, is more interesting than anything that happened in Crossroads of Twilight. And that is the fact that we open with Galad, and the fact that he is challenging Eamon Valda to single combat for killing his mother, or allegedly killing his mother, when the Shan-Chan attacked the White Cloaks. And he is challenging him to single combat. He is forced to accept because of the pressures. Basically, the law states that he has to accept, but the fact that Galad did this in a public place means that there are the social pressures where Valda just agreed that this law exists, but he didn't know that he was the one being challenged. So I found that really interesting, and I'm glad that we get just a little tidbit of Galad and like where he is, because for a while it's kind of been like, oh, he's with the White Cloaks, that's a shame. But he's very clearly still got his loyalties, even though he is the person who does what's right to a fault. I thought it was great that he did this. I was so interested in this whole sequence, and it opened the book with a bang, so I was already on board immediately. And the other thing that I liked is that now that Galad has taken over as the leader of the White Cloaks, he has pledged that they will fight at the last battle against the Shadow, which is just nice, because I feel like to this point the White Cloaks have been interesting in the fact that they are very antagonistic to most other factions, but at the very least, we know that there are going to be some of them fighting for the light at the last battle, even if they have to stand beside people they find distasteful. So now I'm gonna kind of go through all of the main storylines and what I like about each of them, sort of a breakdown of events, but also just me talking about the things that stood out to me and that I found impactful. So I'm gonna start with Matt, and Matt had a very smooth transition from the end of Crossroads of Twilight to the start of this book, because him and his companions, including Tuon, are still traveling with Luca's show at the start of this book. So they are still there, still kind of trying to be undercover, even though like some of that is falling apart for them. Some people have, like, the Suldam have discovered that they like can learn to channel, like anybody who can be a Suldam can learn to channel, and that's kind of the thing that could threaten to turn the Shan-Chan values, or at least some of them, on their heads. And so the first kind of interesting thing that happens in this part of the storyline is that Matt and the traveling show, they see that dead town, and it's really creepy, and then they see that peddler who doesn't manage to get away in time and just like sinks into the ground with the dead town as it disappears. And that understandably frightens a lot of the people who witness it. And it's really creepy, and I thought it was really well done, like as a way to show that the shadow is touching the world, because it was set up in Crossroads of Twilight that people are starting to see dead people, but it wasn't really like emphasized, and this book like kind of continued on and emphasized it I thought it was more well done in this book. And after that, like, they continue on, they are traveling a lot faster now because of the fact that they're all freaked out. And the next town that they come upon is when things kind of hit the fan, because Tuon demands to go into this town and be taken to, they called it a hell, I think, which is basically like a shady, scummy bar, because she wants to watch like bar fights and she wants to experience, like, she's very sheltered. So even though she thinks she knows what she wants, Tom decides that they are going to take her to somewhere that is a very respectable inn and tavern, and she won't know the difference. I mean, I think she does. She's not an idiot, but like, in a way, it's not like she has any actual frame of reference for that. And it's probably a good thing that they didn't take her to an actual shady place. However, Matt gambles with some merchants in this tavern, and then on their way out, one of the merchants that had left early attacks them, and Matt and Tom fight them off. Matt uses Tuon's name, which was a big thing that I really liked, because they were playing their game for so long, and she's like, I win because you were the first one to use my name. And I liked the idea of Matt protecting her, and then realizing that Tuon can probably protect herself pretty well too. And in his moment of like vulnerability, he just wants her to get to safety, so he uses her real name. But it kind of puts a crack in the game that they're playing, because even though she says that she won, you can tell that she like respected his intellect and kind of what they had going, and now that she has won this part of it, she is almost a little bit more open to Matt, and they seem to talk more after that. And well, okay, I think I've gone a little bit out of order, because we also have Matt getting her horse, which I thought was really cool too, because even though Matt doesn't realize it, like, people are like, oh, you got her a courting gift, and he's like, what's that? And even though I feel like people make fun of Matt for not knowing that this is some sort of tradition, but the thing that I liked about it is because Matt didn't mean to get her some sort of symbolic Shan-Chan gift. He just like genuinely wanted to get Tuon a horse because he knew that she would like it, and he knew that both of them would be able to tell what like a good horse looks like, I guess. Like, he has a good eye for horses, and he just genuinely wanted to get it for her because he knew that she would like it. So I appreciated that. I appreciate a lot about their relationship. I really, really like both of them. And then the other really important thing that happens before Matt and his companions and Tuon split off from the show is that Matt, Tom shows Matt his letter from Moraine, and they realize, or at least Matt realizes, that Moraine is not actually dead. She is in that other realm with the Aelfine and the Elfine, and I don't know how to say their names, but I felt so vindicated when this part came up, because I had said in my spoiler chat for Fires of Heaven, and my main thought when I finished Fires of Heaven was, I do not think Moiraine is dead. And this was kind of half confirmed earlier by Lanfear coming back, but I was also like, okay, Lanfear was one of the Forsaken, so like, she is more likely to survive that than Moiraine is. But from the start, I was like, I don't think Moiraine is dead. I think that all they melted was the gateway, not wherever she is. Like, she is still alive wherever she is. And I can't even describe how happy I was to be right about that, because it's probably not even something that's that hard to guess. Like, I genuinely think that it's obvious that that thread was left open, but I am so bad at predictions. That's not my strong suit. And so I had that in my head all the way from Fires of Heaven, and when that happened in this book, I was like, Matt, we already know that you're going to rescue her. There's no way that you can deny that, no matter how much like you're hesitant to. It just made me so happy. So there's that. And all of this happens before they even split off, but after the fight in the streets with the merchant, I guess they were dark friends, I don't really know. They finally decide that in order to keep Tuon like safe for sure, they have to split off from like Luca's show and go a different route. And the other advantage of that is that Shan pursuers will think that they are still with the show and will follow that, at least to a certain extent. But when they split off and when they finally get closer to the like smuggling route through the mountains, they discover that that's no longer an option. I think it was like a landslide or a rock slide, like the whole thing is wiped out. So their only option is the main pass through the mountains, which the Shan occupy. And so Matt is like, okay, we're screwed. Like, I have to think of something here. And he reunites with Telmanas and the members of the Band of the Red Hand, and he is formulating a plan in his head, and Matt is this is kind of just compounding on Matt showing his knowledge of battles and war and like all these memories that he has in his head. And I think that this really fascinates Tuon, because she's already pretty sure that he's the man who can remember Arthur Hawkwing's face, but like Matt denied that when she asked him, obviously. And I really liked the brief moments where we got Tuon's perspective, because it's interesting to see Matt reuniting with his army from her perspective, because they are obviously very loyal to Matt, but she doesn't know his reputation. Like, she only knows what she has seen of him so far. And then we see her getting like genuinely kind of fascinated and impressed by how much like of a lion he is in her like own thoughts. And she's kind of like, what sort of man have I actually gotten myself involved in? Like, he is a lot more layered than he might have seemed at first. And Matt organizes these like ambushes and skirmishes and battles with the Shan that are really, really expertly done, that are meant to draw their main body of the army out of the pass so that they can then use it to get out of Altara. And I loved that idea, and I also just loved like the entire sequence of kind of watching all of those battles play out. Matt is kind of in his element, and Tuon is kind of realizing more of who he is, and it almost puts them on more equal footing, because at this point, Matt isn't totally wrapped up in Tuon. Like, he's actually doing what he's good at, even though he is still focused on her a lot of the time. And he is definitely falling for Tuon. But you can easily see the change in their relationship by the fact that Tuon gives him permission to kiss her. And that obviously totally throws Matt off. The one thing that I like about their relationship is that I think that both of them are really complex characters, and most of the time Matt complains about never understanding women. He's not joking, but it's kind of like a bravado in his own head. Whereas I feel like with Tuon, he genuinely doesn't understand her, but like is making an effort to. Like, he's actually trying his best. Like, he wants to make a good impression, he just has no idea what he's doing. And then we have the like climax of this whole storyline, which is when the Death Watch guard Furyk Karid, I honestly don't know how to say his name, he finally catches up with them, and he finally catches up with Tuon, and this was a nice moment because obviously, like, I'll get more into this when I get into Rand's storyline, but a good portion of the Shan-Chan army is a threat to Tuon. But this guy that we're following, Karid, he genuinely cares about her. Like, he basically helped raise her, and it's very obvious when they meet that she trusts him. And the fact that Matt is willing to let her go, like as long as she can be safely conveyed to Ibu Dar, that this is like one of those fateful signs of their marriage that Tuon had been informed of as well, which is a revelation because we only knew about Matt's prophecies. And the fact that he's willing to let her go means that, like, it's time to marry him. So she does it. And I was just as shocked as everybody else involved in that scene, but I also loved it because, like, I've said this in other videos, but Matt so often does the exact right thing without even necessarily meaning to. Like, the guy has good intentions most of the time, like when it comes to the overarching actions that he takes, but a lot of the times, the things that have the best outcomes for him are things that he didn't even really know he was doing. And I like that part of his luck. And so it's nice that Tuon is with someone that she trusts to get her back safely, and she obviously also trusts Matt because they leave some of the Death Watch guards with him and some of the Ogier gardeners so that they can get the rest of the Shan-Chan army off of their back. And, like, I think that the Death Watch guards genuinely respect Matt for that, and so they basically agree that they have an alliance with each other, Matt and Tuon. And Matt is obviously falling for Tuon, and Tuon, like, isn't there. Like, it's very obvious that she's not there with Matt, but I really hope that this isn't the end of their development together because, like, I really believe that she could really come around on him and they could be really good together. And now Matt has the title of Prince of the Ravens because of the fact that they are married. And so there's a lot of interesting things still going on here. So obviously Tuon does get back to Ibu Dar, and she revenges herself on Suroth, who is a dark friend and has been plotting against the Empire, and Tuon is ready to, like, pick up the slack because the Empire is basically in shambles right now until she was found and can take the basically take the title of Empress. But this entire storyline made me happy because there were a lot of ups and downs and, like, times when you weren't sure how things were gonna go, but there was a lot of triumph involved with that too. Like, we've been waiting to meet the Daughter of the Nine Moons for a long time. Then we've seen Matt and Tuon's relationship develop, and I was really, really happy that they did get married before they separated again, and that Matt had success in these battles, and it, like, this entire thing, I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm looking forward to seeing where that continues to go in the final 3 books. So next up we have Rand's storyline, which in a very real way is intertwined with Matt and Tuon's without actually being intertwined with it. And the reason for that is because Matt spent most of the last book setting up for, like, a meeting with the Shan-Chan, and that he hopefully wants to meet with the Daughter of the Nine Moons and get, like, either an alliance or at least a truce, like a ceasefire type of thing. And what they don't realize, like, they think that this could be a Shan-Chan trap. But what they don't realize is that it's not a Shan-Chan trap, it's actually, like, a dark friend trap. And it's actually Semiraj? I'm just gonna say her name like that. Because what Rand doesn't know is that obviously Tuon is with Matt. Like, the Shan-Chan don't even have her, and they have not had her for a long time. But since they kept her disappearance a secret, Semiraj was able to take advantage of that and like, pretend to be Tuon as a disguise. And so because of the actions taken by Tuon and the, like, Shan-Chan surrounding her, she's become a target for, like, she's become a target because of Suroth and because of Dark Friends. Like, if they kill the actual Tuon, then, like, Suroth can take the throne and become Empress. But, like, it's also so questionable because, like, the Shan-Chan think there are 2 of them, like, they don't really know where Tuon is. And so Rand thinks that he's meeting with the Daughter of the Nine Moons, and they realize very quickly when they get there that that's not the case. And so the interesting thing about this is that to this point in the book, Rand has been sort of struggling with Lews Therin for which one of them gets to seize the one power when they actually draw on the one power. And that's, I think, what happened in this first confrontation, because when Tuon walks out of this house where they're meeting, the illusion flickers, and Rand has never seen Semiraj before, but Lews Therin has seen Semiraj before. So Rand instinctually ends up revealing that he knows who this woman is, and that makes her attack, and he does not have time to react, and so he puts up his hand, and of course he loses his hand, which was a shock to me, but this is also something that I was accidentally spoiled for. I knew that at some point in this series Rand lost his hand, and I was a little surprised because I thought that it was going to happen, I guess, in one of the final couple of books. It sounds funny to call book 11 of a series early on, but I was surprised that it happened this early on. I don't really know why, but obviously that is a big consequence, and I was happy that the stakes were high, that there was actually something that could go wrong and did go wrong, even though they triumphed over Semiraj, and Nynaeve healed Rand's wrist and all of that. But the interesting thing here is that with Semiraj bound and shielded, she basically reveals to everybody else that Rand can hear Lews Therin's voice in his head, and that he has the ability to communicate with his past self. So that's interesting because it suggests that he's definitely not going crazy. It's an actual past self that he's able to communicate with, but that doesn't mean that the outcome is any better than him, because apparently it's nearly always fatal. But the thing that I find interesting is that, just based on their dialogue, Rand and Lews Therin clearly also regards Rand as a voice in his head. So my question is, because the wheel is cyclical and circular and will turn again and again, is Rand also someone from Lews Therin's past? When Lews Therin is the Dragon Reborn and is a human, does he hear Rand's voice in his head as his past self? Because because they say that ages will turn, and then the turning of the wheel, this same age will come back again. So does that not mean that while Lews Therin is in Rand's past, Rand is also in Lews Therin's past? I feel like I'm melting my own brain, but I want to know if that's true, because that would be really cool, and I kind of think that that's what we're leaning towards right now, because Rand is yeah, you're a voice in my head, buddy, and Lews Therin is why do I have this crazy voice in my head? So they clearly both, is it really them? Is it both them? I don't know. So anyway, there was some pretty interesting stuff in Rand's storyline too, and I did enjoy his storyline in this book, so I'm excited to see where he goes, because he is very clearly making his preparations now for the last battle. Next up, we have the Perrin and Faile storyline. So we have Faile, Alejandra, and Magdyn, who of course is Morgase, kind of continuing their lives in the camp, continuing to amass other loyal Gaishane, and basically trying to ensure their route of escape, whether that is through Roland and that other faction of Aiel, or through Galena, who they don't really know whether they can trust, but they don't realize how deeply they really cannot trust her. If she gets free, she is not to be trusted. So I do find it interesting how we see their journey while they kind of wait for Perrin, even though they don't realize that that's what they're waiting for, because Faile doesn't know that Perrin is there. But then on the flip side, we see Perrin making his alliance with Tylee, Kurgan from the Shanshan, who is a high-ranking general, and their plan, I thought this was really clever, is to basically create fork root tea from the entire water supply for the Shido Aiel camp, which means that they will be neutralizing any women who can channel, because the biggest threat is not only how like battle savvy the Aiel are, but the fact that there are like 400 wise ones there and probably 300 of them can channel, which is a huge threat. So they need to neutralize that right away. And not only do they send in like fork root, they also send in people through the aqueduct so that they can kind of be ready to save Fail, save like the others, and get out. And I don't know, I thought that their plan was a good one, so I liked watching that develop and their preparations. And of course, while this all like kind of works out, like overall it does work out, there are some wrinkles. So Galena tricks Fail and Alejandra and Magden and traps them in the basement of a house so that she can get away with the oath rod, and she clearly didn't act quickly enough. I mean, her entrapping of the women was pretty effective, but luckily they ended up being saved by Roland, and then Galena does not escape. In a way, I feel bad for her, but at the same time, she does not deserve to escape. Like, I just wish that they could have known that she was Black Aja earlier on, because like as it stands, she did not escape and she's still with Thorava, but like Fail and them, they have no closure on that. Like they have no idea what happened to her. They think she escaped by the time they figure out that she was Black Aja. But the other kind of couple of wrinkles is that Tam al'Thor shows up. That made me so happy. I was very, very like pleased that Tam was there to lead troops and kind of be this expert in Two Rivers bowmanship that he is and all of that. The interesting thing was that he does not believe that his son is the Dragon Reborn, and I don't blame him, because that's not something that you can just easily accept. But it is an interesting contrast to the rest of our characters, because the rest of our main characters have been out in the world, like going through so much, and we have followed them through books and books now. And I really enjoy these connections back to the Two Rivers and the roots that these characters came from. But Tam al'Thor has not seen the same things that like our younger characters have seen. And he, like, even with what he experienced with Perrin in the Shadow Rising and like the way that the Two Rivers has grown since then, like he has seen a lot of change, but he still doesn't necessarily have reason to believe that all of this magical stuff is going on and that his own son is the Dragon Reborn. So that was kind of a nice little callback. I really liked that. And then the final wrinkle in the plan is that Masima has been whispering poison in Aram's ear, which is not entirely shocking, but I do think that Robert Jordan did a good job of having that be subtle, because Aram has been having questionable motives lately anyway. Like he is the type of person who has been shown to be loyal to the point of a fault, and is extremely loyal to Fail, and I think that's how Masima took advantage of it, is that if he could convince Aram that Perrin had eyes that were a sign of the shadow, and that would have been a danger to Fail, then that would be easy to convince Aram that Perrin had to die, and that is exactly what happened. And I thought that was a really interesting interaction, because it's not altogether surprising, but of course Masima did end up surviving, even though a lot of his troops were smashed by the Shido. And I mean, I'm glad that Perrin got away from that interaction, and then Perrin ends up killing Roland, who was actually helping Fail, and then the fact that Fail chooses not to reveal that, I understand why, because it's not exactly what you want to be telling Perrin in that moment, but it was a little bit sad, because that was somebody that was actually helping her, but then again, he was kind of trying to coerce her into things, so nobody is perfect. It honestly was a pretty interesting, like, dynamic all throughout that interaction. And then finally, to close up that storyline, they captured Savannah, and so Ty Lee has her, and then Thorava is leading the Shido Aiel back to the Threefold Land, back to the Aiel Waste, where they will rebuild for generations to come and try and recover from the shame of what Savannah brought to them. So Perrin and his Shanshan allies have won a resounding victory, and they definitely respect each other, and there are just more and more connections between the Shanchan and our main characters being formed, so I'm really intrigued to see how all of this is eventually going to come together, because I think that inevitably they are going to end up all fighting alongside each other in the last battle. I just don't know how it's going to happen exactly. So there are other storylines, of course, but I think that I've gotten through the ones that I have the most to say about. So I'm going to move on to Eguin, and even though I absolutely adored her in this book, I don't know that I actually have that much to say about it, because Eguin, of course, was captured at the end of last book, and because she is a dreamwalker and can access Teleran Riyadh like whenever she wants, she's able to hold council with the Hall, with the rebels, and forbid her own rescue, which they think is concerning. They want to do it anyway. But the thing that I love about Eguin is that even though she's forced to like become a novice again, and she's closely watched and she's given fork root tea and all of this, she literally just refuses to be broken. Like, she has so much dignity. She truly is the Emerald Seat, like, and the way she carries herself shows that. And I just loved the way that she slowly gained respect throughout the tower, and like the recognition, I guess, where they can really see like who she is. They can see that she's not a novice. And I don't know, I love Eguin, so I was really proud of her this book, and I think that that's pretty much all I have to say. Next up, another one that I don't have too much to say, even though it was amazing, is Nynaeve and Lan. So Lan decides that he is going to go back to Shinar and back to the Borderlands to fight, and Nynaeve basically makes him promise that he will accept if anybody wants to ride alongside him and support him in this. But then, after making him promise that, she does trick him. She basically takes him as far as possible from the place he actually wants to be, so that Lan is going to have to ride hundreds of miles. And at first you're like, Nynaeve, what the hell? But then Nynaeve like travels throughout the Borderlands and asks people, like, the quote still gives me goosebumps, and I don't want to butcher it, but so I'm not going to say it like word for word, but she's basically telling them that Lan Mandragoran is riding to the last battle and he shouldn't be riding alone. And it's pretty easy, I think, once people realize who she is representing Lan, that they're gonna go support him. And I'm so looking forward to seeing like everybody flocking to his cause and going to support him as he rides through the Borderlands and realizes what is waiting for him until he gets to Shinar. So I loved that. Like, that happened kind of in the middle of the book, and it was a small thing, but it stood out so much. Like, that impacted me. Finally, the last storyline that I have to talk about is Elaine. And so just a few like things that happen earlier on to get out of the way is that Avienda is with her at first and then leaves, but Avienda discovers her ability to kind of sense what a Terangrial can do, which is really cool and is definitely, there's no way that that's not coming back into play later, because that is like a very useful talent. So I loved that. And then the other thing is the fact that the palace is changing. So this is kind of along the same line as the dead people, like the dead town, in terms of I really liked how this book leaned further into the fact that the shadow is touching the world, like the dark one is touching the world. And it's in ways that now people cannot ignore and can actually see. And I liked that Elaine kind of just thought that it was her confused brain at first from being pregnant, but then realized that no, like this is actually happening. And it's kind of creepy, like it's very subtle, but it is creepy. And so really, even though I enjoyed Elaine's storyline throughout this book, it does really ramp up at the end, because we have like Elaine, the other Aes Sedai, the warders, etc., like Brigitte's there. They all follow this spy that they've hired to the place where Malar, her captain, goes, because they know that they can't trust him. And they've finally found out where the hideout is, and it is him and supposedly two sisters of the Black Aja, and they are going to ambush them, and like they are gonna link and try and like shield these women and arrest them. But that all goes very sideways because there are actually 5 more sisters of the Black Aja there. And so, yeah, like Elaine is the only one that survives. And so that was kind of sad, but I was glad that we got it revealed who was the black sister that was like undercover in the palace itself. And I liked the fact that Elaine was kidnapped, and like all the sequence that happened from here was very like high energy and like high pulse rate. Like I was stressed out and I was like very like I could feel Brigitte's stress and her need to get Elaine back. So I thought that that was really well done. And you see her fast acting and her fast planning to like get the Seafolk Windfinders to help her, and I mean, to be quite frank, to manipulate them into helping her, but it was still very effective. And her ability to like prioritize and send some men to where the gates were being attacked by Aramilla, while also bringing a big enough force with her to that gateway where they can then cut off the Black Sisters that are trying to kidnap Elaine and confront them. And even though there were a lot of casualties, it was really cool to see the Seafolk and the Windfinders get involved and to see them get Elaine back. And like it kind of happened fast, but I didn't mind because Brigitte was like all over that. Like she did not let them get far at all. It was just very like effective and well executed, I thought. And then obviously, they take their army through another gateway to take Aramilla in the back while they're attacking the gates, and they defeat that army too. It was a very triumphant end of the book for Elaine, and I really liked that. And you can see that the 2 houses, Elenia and Nain, I don't really know how to say that, they are just kind of screwed because Aramilla like coerced them into proclaiming support for her, but the houses that were not tied down to Aramilla then switched to Elaine, which helped her out greatly. And then finally she had that meeting with the final like different faction, and they were behind Elorian. That's at least how I would say it. And I just really enjoyed how that meeting went, because Elaine is not overstepping her bounds. She knows that she's not the queen yet, but she kind of just lays out like her plans and what she's doing. Like that's all she does. She kind of just shows the people who were with Elorian that she's competent and smart and has this under control, and they think like, yeah, okay, we should probably reunite Andor again. And like it makes sense because they don't want to destroy each other in a succession battle and then end up not being able to face anyone else and not having a united Andor or Camelin, or like they're all very proud of their country. So it just made sense to me that once they had faith in Elaine, they were like, yeah, okay, like so I didn't mind that, even though it did happen a little bit quickly, and Elaine was finally able to ascend the throne. So she is the Queen of Andor, and I really do wonder what is going to happen when they find out that Morghese is still alive. But for now, well, okay, I guess Morghese did abdicate it technically anyway, so it's not as though it's relevant, but I do wonder if that's going to throw a wrench into things somehow still. But for now, I'm just really proud of Elaine. So now that I have talked for a way longer amount of time than is reasonable, I'm just gonna say that my main takeaway for the reason that I enjoyed this book so much is that for me it was the perfect balance of setup and payoff. Like there are still moving pieces on the board where I'm really intrigued to see where they're gonna go in the next 3 books, but I was able to have like triumphs and like watch the characters do things that made me proud of them, and like the plot actually moved forward in this book. So there were payoffs, and I was so happy. Like some payoffs that I had been waiting multiple books to see happen, and they happened, and I was just really pleased overall. So please let me know what your thoughts are on Knife of Dreams. Let me know what you think of my thoughts. I'm sure that there are still things that I forgot to mention, but I just tried to hit the main points of the things that I really enjoyed and the things that stood out. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and I have information about my Discord server Chapter linked in the description below. And I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!